I never thought a few extra inches of wood could threaten to destroy my life. But that's exactly what happened when my neighborhood HOA decided my backyard fence was too tall. The day it started was ordinary: blue skies, kids riding bikes, neighbors mowing lawns. I had just finished staining my brand new cedar fence, proud of the way it stood tall and solid, giving my family a little more privacy from the busy street behind us. My wife loved it. My kids could finally play without strangers peeking in. Then came the letter. It was slipped under my door in a white envelope stamped urgent. A notice. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. Inside, in cold, printed words, it read, "Your fence exceeds the approved height of 6 feet by approximately 12 inches. You are hereby ordered to correct this violation within 10 days, or further action will be taken." I couldn't believe it. A single foot taller than the rulebook, and they were threatening further action. I thought maybe it was just a warning, something I could talk out with them. After all, I wasn't hurting anyone. But when I called the HOA office, a woman with a clipped, robotic voice told me, "Sir, this is not up for discussion. Your fence is in violation. If you fail to comply, we will escalate the matter to legal proceedings." Legal proceedings? Over a fence? I tried reasoning with my neighbors, even invited a few over to look. Most shrugged and said it looked fine to them, but one man, Mr. Halston, the HOA president, stood on the sidewalk with his arms crossed, smirking like he had been waiting for this moment. He was always the type who measured grass blades with a ruler. "Rules are rules," he said flatly. "And you broke them." That night I barely slept. My wife asked if maybe we should just lower the fence, but I felt something deep inside me resist. It wasn't about the wood, or the nails, or the height anymore. It was about control. About standing up to people who thought they could bully us in our own home. So I made a decision. I wasn't taking it down. The next week, another envelope came. This one wasn't a notice. It was a summons. The HOA had actually filed a lawsuit against me in county court, demanding I remove or lower the fence and pay their legal fees. I remember holding that paper in my hands, the world around me going silent. They weren't bluffing. They were serious. My neighbors peeked from behind curtains as a process server walked away from my door. The news spread fast. Some whispered that I was reckless, others quietly told me they admired my stand. I didn't know how I would fight back yet, but I knew one thing: I couldn't give in. Not this time. Because if they could sue me over a fence, what would stop them from coming for everything else? And that's when I realized this wasn't just about wood and nails. This was about my home, my freedom, and my dignity. And I was ready to fight. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant, a place where ordinary lives were turned upside down with the strike of a gavel. As I stood in line at the clerk's desk, clutching the HOA's lawsuit papers, I kept asking myself how it had come to this. A fence. Just a fence. The lawsuit was brutal. They demanded I tear the structure down, pay thousands of dollars in non-compliance fines, and cover the HOA's attorney fees. They even slipped in a clause threatening foreclosure if I refused. My stomach twisted at that word, foreclosure. They wanted my house. At home, my wife looked pale when I laid the papers on the kitchen table. "We can't afford this," she whispered. "What if they win?" I didn't answer. Because deep down, I didn't know. The next HOA meeting was packed. I walked into the clubhouse and all eyes turned toward me. The board members sat at a long table like judges, with Mr. Halston in the center. He wore a black suit that matched his expression, smug and unyielding. "Mr. Carter," he began, not even pretending to hide his disdain, "you've been served with notice. You are in violation of Covenant 14B. This is not negotiable. You have until your court date to comply or face the consequences." Neighbors whispered around me, some shaking their heads. But I also noticed a few nodding subtly, as if silently rooting for me. I realized then that this wasn't just my battle. Others had suffered under the HOA's iron fist. I was just the first to fight back. I stood tall, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm not lowering my fence. It gives my family privacy. And it doesn't hurt anyone." A board member scoffed. "Rules are rules." I wanted to shout that rules should serve people, not control them. But before I could respond, something unexpected happened. From the back of the room, an older man raised his hand. "Point of order," he barked. Heads turned. He introduced himself as Thomas Green, a retired lawyer who had lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. "I've read the covenants," he continued. "Nowhere does it state that the HOA has authority to sue homeowners for minor violations without first offering mediation. This board is overstepping." The room fell silent. Even Halston's smirk faltered for a moment. It was the first crack in their armor. After the meeting, Mr. Green approached me. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp. "Son, I don't like bullies. And that's what this board is. If you're willing to fight, I'll help you, for free." I almost couldn't believe it. Out of nowhere, I had an ally, and not just any ally. A lawyer who knew their game. For the first time since this nightmare started, hope flickered in my chest. Maybe I wasn't alone. Maybe I had a chance. That night, as I told my wife about Mr. Green's offer, she burst into tears, this time out of relief. For weeks we had felt cornered, helpless. Now we had someone in our corner. But little did we know, the HOA wasn't going to back down. In fact, they were about to raise the stakes in ways we never saw coming. Because the lawsuit? That was only the beginning. The first official court date was still weeks away, but the HOA didn't waste time turning up the pressure. It started with little things. I woke up one morning to find a bright orange violation notice slapped on my front door. Trash can visible from the street. Another came the next day, weeds along property line. Then, mailbox paint faded. They were piling on violation after violation, a paper war designed to break me down. My wife begged me to ignore them, but I knew what they were doing, trying to drown me in fear, to make me cave before I ever set foot in court. But then came something darker. Late one evening, as I was closing the blinds, I noticed headlights parked across the street. A black SUV, engine running, just sitting there. When I stepped outside, the vehicle rolled slowly away, but I caught a glimpse of a man in a black uniform inside, one of the HOA's hired enforcers. The next morning, I found my fence spray painted with a crude message, "Take it down." My kids saw it before I did, and the fear in their eyes cut deeper than any lawsuit ever could. I reported it to the HOA, but of course, they shrugged. "No proof it was us," Halston said smugly when I confronted him. "Maybe your fence is just unpopular." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about rules or appearances. This was personal. Mr. Green, my retired lawyer neighbor, was furious when he heard. "Classic intimidation tactics," he muttered, flipping through the HOA's own bylaws. "They're overreaching. But that vandalism? That's criminal. We can use this against them." Still, the pressure was mounting. Bills were stacking up. My wife's nerves were fraying. At one point she said, "Maybe it's not worth it. Maybe we should just lower the fence." Her words stung, but I couldn't blame her. The weight of the fight was crushing us both. I told her, if we give in now, they'll know they can control us forever. I won't live like that. Not in my own home. Then came the shocker. One evening, I opened the mailbox and found a thick envelope from the county courthouse. Inside was an amended lawsuit. The HOA wasn't just demanding I lower the fence anymore. They were now claiming my fence was illegal construction that decreased neighborhood property values. Their demand? Not only tear it down, but pay the HOA $50,000 in damages. $50,000. My hands shook as I read the number over and over. It felt like the ground had been ripped from under me. How could a simple fence turn into this? When I showed Mr. Green, his jaw tightened. They're bluffing with inflated numbers, hoping to scare you into settling. But this changes everything. We'll have to build a much stronger case. We'll need evidence, witnesses, records. I swallowed hard. Evidence? Witnesses? This wasn't just a neighborhood spat anymore. It was a full-blown war. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, a neighbor slipped me a folded note late at night. She whispered, "Be careful. The board's planning something. They don't just want your fence, they want you gone." The note made my blood run cold. Because if that was true, then the lawsuit was only the beginning of a much bigger plan. The neighbor's warning replayed in my head all night. They don't just want your fence, they want you gone. At first, I didn't want to believe it. But the next week proved her words weren't paranoia. They were prophecy. It started when my mortgage company sent me a letter, claiming they had been contacted about ongoing HOA legal disputes. The message was polite, but the threat was clear. If I lost the case, my house could be forced into foreclosure. Someone from the HOA had gone behind my back to stir trouble with my lender. I stormed into Mr. Green's office, his garage, really, cluttered with dusty law books and half-finished projects. I slammed the letter down. They're trying to take my home before the trial even begins. He leaned back in his chair, frowning deeply. I was afraid of this. Halston's board doesn't just want compliance. They're trying to make an example out of you, scare the rest of the neighborhood into obedience. If they break you, nobody else will dare resist them. The thought made my blood boil. This wasn't about offense. This was about control. And then, the evidence started to surface. One evening, that same neighbor, her name was Rachel, knocked quietly on my back door. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder before handing me a flash drive. I used to be on the HOA board, she whispered, before Halston pushed me out. I kept copies of some emails. You'll want to see them. After she left, my wife and I sat at the computer, our hands trembling as we opened the files. What we found made my stomach churn. Emails between board members, mocking homeowners, plotting to raise fines, even bragging about how much money they could squeeze out of lawsuits. And then one message stood out, an email from Halston himself. If Carter won't back down, we'll bury him. We could use the property for future development if foreclosure goes through. Keep pushing. Future development. That was it. They didn't just hate my fence, they wanted my property. My home sat on a corner lot, larger than most in the neighborhood. If they forced me out, the HOA could sell the land for a huge profit. I felt sick. My family's nightmare wasn't an accident. It was a calculated plan. The next HOA meeting, I walked in with a different energy. Fear had been replaced with fire. As Halston droned on about community standards, I raised my hand and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. I know what you're doing. This isn't about a fence. This is about money. You want my land, and you'll destroy anyone who stands in your way. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Halston's smirk faltered for just a second, then returned, colder than ever. Conspiracy theories won't save you in court, Mr. Carter, he said smoothly. But I saw the unease in the eyes of other board members. And I knew I had struck a nerve. After the meeting, Green clapped me on the shoulder. Now we've got them where it hurts. With those emails, we can prove malicious intent. A jury won't look kindly on that. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had the upper hand. But I also knew this meant the board would hit back harder than ever. And I was right. Because just days later, as I was driving home, flashing lights appeared in my rearview mirror. A police car pulled me over, and the officer walked up with a grim expression. Sir, he said, we've received a complaint. You're being investigated for a code violation that may carry criminal penalties. I froze, gripping the steering wheel. This was no longer just a civil battle. The HOA had escalated the war into something far more dangerous. The police officer's words hit me like a hammer. Criminal penalties. For offense? I sat there in my car, gripping the wheel, trying to keep my voice steady. Officer, what violation are you talking about? He glanced at his clipboard. Anonymous complaint filed with the city. Says your fence was built without a proper permit. That's a misdemeanor under local code. I almost laughed, it was so absurd. But the officer wasn't joking. He handed me a yellow citation slip and said I'd have to appear in municipal court. That night, my wife was in tears again. They're turning us into criminals over this. What if you get arrested? What about the kids? Her words cut deep. I was angry, but beneath the anger was exhaustion. It felt like every time we stood up, the HOA found another way to strike back. But Green wasn't shaken. When I showed him the citation, he actually smiled grimly. Good. Let them overplay their hand. They've now dragged city code into this, and that means we can subpoena building records. If there's corruption here, and I suspect there is, it'll come out. He was right. Over the next week, Green filed requests for every permit pulled in the neighborhood for the past 5 years. What we found was explosive. Multiple board members themselves had built patios, decks, and extensions without permits. Some even larger violations than my fence. Yet none of them had ever faced citations. It was selective enforcement, clear as day. Rachel, the former board member, confirmed it. Halston protects his friends. He only enforces rules when it benefits him. I warned people, but nobody listened. Suddenly, my defense wasn't just about my fence. It was about exposing the hypocrisy at the heart of the HOA. The municipal hearing arrived quickly. I stood before the judge, the HOA's lawyer smirking in the corner, confident I'd be fined or worse. But Green laid out the evidence with surgical precision. Permit violations by board members. Selective enforcement. And finally, the leaked email where Halston admitted his real motive, forcing me out. The judge leaned forward, his expression hard. So the HOA wants to pursue criminal charges for offense, while its own board has committed worse violations without consequence? The HOA's lawyer stammered. Halston's face turned crimson. The judge dismissed the citation on the spot. But more than that, he ordered an investigation into the HOA's practices. For the first time, I saw real fear in Halston's eyes. But victory didn't come without cost. By the time we left the courthouse, my family was drained, my finances stretched thin, and my nerves shredded. Green warned me, they'll double down before the civil trial. You embarrass them, and men like Halston don't forgive. Be ready for anything. That night, I found a note shoved under my door. No envelope, no signature. Just 6 words scrawled in angry handwriting. Drop the case or lose everything. My hands shook as I read it. This wasn't just legal anymore. This was a threat. The HOA had lost one battle. But the war for my home was about to reach its boiling point. The county courthouse was packed on the morning of the civil trial. Neighbors filled the benches, reporters clutched notepads, and even people from outside our community had come to watch. Word had spread, this wasn't just about offense anymore. It was about an HOA that had crossed every line. I sat at the defense table beside Mr. Green, my retired lawyer-turned-ally. Across from us, the HOA's legal team looked sharp and confident. At the center, of course, was Halston, his black suit pressed, his smirk unshakable. He thought this was the day he would break me. The HOA's lawyer opened with dramatic flair. He painted me as a reckless homeowner who thought rules didn't apply to him, who damaged property values and refused to cooperate. We demand the fence be torn down, he thundered, and that the defendant pay $50,000 in damages for his willful violations. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Then it was Green's turn. He rose slowly, his voice calm but cutting. This case is not about community standards. It's about abuse of power. The HOA has selectively enforced rules, targeted my client with harassment, and concealed its true motives, profit and control. He clicked a remote, and the courtroom projector lit up with the emails Rachel had given us. The jury read every word, the mocking, the threats, and finally Halston's damning line. We could use the property for future development if foreclosure goes through. Gasps filled the room. Halston shifted in his chair, his smirk gone. His lawyer objected, but the judge allowed it. Intent mattered. Then Green called witnesses. Rachel testified about her time on the board, how Halston silenced dissent and manipulated rules. Another neighbor confirmed the vandalism on my fence. And finally, Green presented the evidence of unpermitted projects, massive additions built by board members who had never been fined, let alone sued. The HOA lawyer tried to counter, but the damage was done. Their hypocrisy was laid bare for all to see. Then came the twist no one expected. During cross-examination, Green asked Halston directly, "Isn't it true that you personally stand to profit if my client's property goes into foreclosure?" Halston scoffed. Ridiculous. But Green produced a document, property development plans filed with the city 6 months earlier. The name on the application? Halston Development LLC. The courtroom erupted. Even the judge looked stunned. Halston had planned to seize my home all along, to bulldoze it and sell the land. That was the moment the case was over. The judge's ruling was swift and brutal. The HOA's lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. They were ordered to cover my legal fees, repay damages for harassment, and face a full investigation into their practices. Halston himself was referred to the state attorney's office for fraud. When the gavel struck, I felt the weight of months of fear and anger finally lift. My wife sobbed in relief, my kids hugged me so tightly I thought they'd never let go. Neighbors I barely knew clapped me on the back, whispering, "You did it. You stood up for all of us." Walking out of that courthouse, I looked up at the sky, the sun shining brighter than it had in months. The fence was still standing, and so was I. I hadn't just saved my home. I had shown everyone that no matter how powerful they seem, bullies fall when someone dares to fight back. If you've ever felt trapped by people who abuse power, remember this: you can fight back. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more stories, and share it with someone who needs to hear that standing up is always worth it.